and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to Nerd Fight! The ultimate showdown where geek culture collides with unfiltered opinions and passionate debates. I'm your host, Mr. Know-It-All, bringing you the latest and greatest from the world of movies, TV shows, and all things nerdy. But hold on to your warp cores because the real captain of this starship is none other than Salty Trekker. So strap in for a wild ride as we're going to discuss Agatha all along, plus take your questions on this open mic Nerd Fights. You don't want to miss it. That means only one thing. It's time to fight. Nerd Fights.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Hello, welcome to Nerd Fights. I am one of your great hosts here, Mr. Know-It-All, and of course, joining me is the captain of the starship, Salty Trekker. Salty, how are you, sir?
Cockeyed.
Right on. How's your week been? I know there's been a lot of craziness going on in the world of entertainment. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff other than just Agatha, but Agatha's the main review that we're going to be doing, which is episode 2. We're going to talk through and sort of get thoughts on how's your week been?
Yeah.
That good, huh?
Yeah, that good. So
Love it.
Aside, the real life world sometimes just is a little too real.
I can feel you on that one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, wife had a seizure this week, and I've talked about it on my regular live streams before. Is that for her the stupid mail order pharmacy that we're first forced to use by the insurance company, whose name I shall not mention. Gosh, they unfortunately they decided to leave my wife hanging and without her seizure medication for a couple of weeks. So she just got it, and her body's trying to readjust to having it, and that triggered a seizure. So because of that, now she can't drive for a period of time until they're sure that she's okay again.
Right.
And that means that not only do I get to do all my regular duties, but also play dad taxi service for the kids and everything. So
Dad taxi service, let's go.
yeah.
I think we've all been there at some point. At least I have.
Yeah, but what sucks is that I have 2 adult kids who can't drive, and we live outside the city limits, which means that Dad Taxi is a very busy service.
Dad Taxi. On top of, once in a while, you should do the ride share. You're like, sorry, this is my family. Hi, family. This is what's your name, Jerry? Okay, or whatever.
Yeah, so Mom Taxi is usually pretty busy, while Dad Taxi is out doing Uber. But now I have to do double duty, so it's been exhausting.
I feel you, brother. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully things start to improve or get a little bit better for you.
Well, and Thomas, I see Thomas Potts is here. He will be very happy to know that thanks to Mr. Know-It-All, I've found absolute proof of the triple timeline theory. And not only that, but that the series Enterprise is in the alternate timeline.
Oh, yeah, you were talking about that, and I know that I can't wait to get into that a little deeper.
Yeah.
I know that we're actually putting together a thing fully forming the triple timeline theory finally.
Yes.
Which I'm exactly excited about, to be honest. I think it's going to be, it'll be interesting. It's fun. I'm having fun putting it together. I know you had fun recording it, and because with the first time you told it to me, I was blown away because it made sense on both a mathematical and sort of so you know how sometimes people argue, well, the reason this didn't exist is the reason it breaks canon is because they didn't have it in mind. Who cares? We can still make it all work,
right?
And make it work well. And if anything, it's more fun that way. It's funny. I had an idea I was telling Mrs. Know-It-All about. I said we need to do a time travel sort of a fan film, where the point of it is that based on the invention of time travel, we use it to do one thing, and that's go back in time and fix Star Trek canon. Like we go back to Gene Roddenberry, you try to help him, and then what happens is, and we get Eugene Roddenberry involved, and what happens is as we go through trying to fix those things, what we actually do is break it and solidify it as always being the way we end up being.
Right.
And also, which totally
the old predestination paradox,
which is literally all Star Trek's all about. And I'm like, let's go. I feel like that would be the absolute, that would be the funniest and really, really best sort of approach for that thing. But Anyway, this week's show, there wasn't a whole lot going on. Don't listen to Salty's lies; it's awesome. There wasn't a whole lot going on in terms of like a lot of different things to watch. I mean, there were. Trust me, there were a ton of things to watch. But because they moved Penguin to Sunday, so I'm not going to get to watch it till tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Agatha All Along, episode 3 that finally dropped. And also there's some news having to do with Agatha in general, but also some information, new information. I say new information, but there's some stuff we're going to talk about having to do with the Acolyte again, because we just can't stop talking about that train wreck. And again, I know that you said there was some, we talked briefly, you and I, about it last night.
Well, there's also that trailer drop that for the Thunderbolts.
Yeah, the Thunderbolts trailer drop, which I've got, we can talk about that too. And this is, again, the whole the trailer for the Ballerina, John Wickster. That was up.
And you sound like you went underwater again for some. You keep doing that. I don't think it's a hardware issue.
What do you mean?
Well, because if this is a different mic.
Well, the issue, I don't know. Who knows? It could be any. The thing is, the mic is, unless I'm going to sit here and talk with a mic in front of my face, which I hate doing because I'm not on the radio.
Right.
Let me see. I can try one other thing. See how this works. Does that work any better?
There.
How's that any better?
I don't know. It sounds fine right now.
It sounds because I'm holding the actual receiver thing.
Yeah.
Let me just take this off.
The trick becomes whether or not it stays that way, because it just seems like at random, all of a sudden your voice.
That's because it's you have to normally talk a certain way. Who knows? She goes so much. My wife said, but the problem is I have a shirt. I'm not wearing a V-neck, so I can't put it here. So I either have to hold it like an idiot or just clip it on my shirt. And we always got to live with it. So there you go. Everybody gets that. That's what you get for now.
Well,
sorry if it doesn't work out.
I know you're worried about looking great, but
it's more looking professional. But yeah, I get it. Of course, I can always go back to using my boom mic. The problem is I've been doing so many projects lately. I haven't had time to reset anything up. Like everything keeps getting broken down and set up and broken down and set up again. So it's like I'm just trying to find stability in keeping my stuff here. But anyway,
maybe you should get a mic specifically just for your podcasting stuff.
Thomas Potts just cursed us out.
A great Rings of Power episode this week.
I don't know that there's such thing as no offense. That's like saying there were good episodes of The Acolyte. There were good moments in The Acolyte, but when you go 2 whole seasons, that's when it's all right. I don't know the acronym. Sorry. What does IEM mean? What does that mean?
IEM.
Yeah, I have no clue what the acronym means.
Idiotic electromagnetism.
In-ear monitors. No, I do not use in-ear monitors.
Oh, come on, man! You work in the business and you don't know that IEM is in-ear monitors. Shame
That's
on
if you work on stage material. Nobody working in actual production settings uses in-ear monitors, unless you're in the news, and then you have to be able to have your producer tell you stuff in your ears really quickly.
Right. So
it's a different world in that respect. All right, here we go. Now I just turned off all the auto gain, auto.
And you're a lot quieter now.
I
can hear me.
You can hear. Well, you can always hear you. So whatever.
No. Now I can hear me with a slight delay, like your mic is picking me up.
How's that? Is that better?
I don't know. Is that better? Yeah, I don't hear me now.
I don't know. Is that better? No, either. Let's continue.
This is all stemming from Mr. Know-It-All trying to look professional as he's trying to fix his audio during the show.
Because you brought it up, Mr. You want to bring up the guard? We'll do the show business on air. So it's all good. And he's absolutely right. It is what rock stars use.
And Film Bros podcast says have not started either of the shows. Why not? I mean,
they're good shows.
You think Rings of Power is a good show? You're gone. I can barely hear you now. You sound like you're about 100 miles away from your microphone. I can barely tell that you're even talking. Now I can't hear you at all. Are you signing? Is that what that is? Are you trying to sign? Because I don't hear you. Either I'm deaf or your microphone is not giving me any audio. I faintly hear like, you sound like, you know, you want me to keep talking? Is that what you're saying? So yeah, I guess he wants me to talk to you guys about what an idiot he's being, because what we've learned today is Mr. Know-It-All doesn't know anything at all, despite his name being Mr. Know-It-All. Thomas, yes, agrees. He got much quieter. Let's see. Amateur hours, says Stanley. Yes, indeed. That's what we're doing here. Reminds you of Matthew. Yes, indeed. Maybe Juan is the larger, blacker life with Matthew. That could be it. Um, can't hear him at all. Yeah, he just kind of disappeared. Try smoke signals. That might work. Although, isn't that just a little racist to suggest smoke signals? I mean, well, granted, he's not indigenous, but wouldn't want to offend anybody. And Timmy's at the well. No idea what you mean there. And that text, I'm assuming, is probably from Mr. Know-It-All, because he disappeared. Um, anyway, so yeah, this is gonna be the best show ever. Where now and you know, so we watched Agatha this week. Hopefully, Mr. Know-It-All will be back on momentarily. Uh, any minute now. Any minute now. All right. Let's see. So, let's see. Trustin in the house says, "Good afternoon. How you doing, Trustin?" I'm just right now. I mean, I'm just talking to you guys until Mr. Know-It-All gets back. So, if you guys have any questions, comments, what have you, until we get our technical problems worked out, which hopefully will be soon. Um, but yeah, trying to think of everything that's been going on. So I know that. Let me see here. But anyway, so yeah, we were talking about the budgetary thing with the Acolyte. That came out that it went over budget 230 million. And what I was talking to Mr. Know-It-All about was,
Now I can't hear you at all.
what?
See, this thing's weird.
Now I hear you.
The funny thing is now I can't hear you.
Oh, great.
Oh, I know why. I know why. Because I plugged in the USB,
Oh,
so I'm
Lordy.
trying to use my microphone as the audio device as well for the rest of the audio. That's
Yeah.
on. Let me fix it right now. There we go.
And Stanley yells, "Success!" Well, partial. Still waiting for him to get full audio back. And to be fair, I was giving Mr. Know-It-All a hard time, but to be fair, this is a lot of complicated gear that he's constantly breaking down, breaking down, setting up, because he uses all this gear outside of just doing stuff online. So, and so that makes it, doubly tricky to, be constantly breaking down, setting up everything. And I've seen his full setup, and it is way more complicated than what I know I can handle. Trust says, had some great pound, cleaned out my vacuum cleaner, so it sucks again. Living the dream. Well, that sounds pretty exciting there, Tristan. I'm glad your vacuum cleaner sucks again. And let's see. We have committed back up. Not sure exactly what that means. Maybe you should get extra gear. Maybe you got to pay for it. That's the problem. I mean, like when you're talking about professional grade gear, that ain't cheap. You like I don't know. How good Mr. Know-It-All's insurance policy is, but if it's really good, I might have to take a trip down to his place and liberate some of his gear. See, I'm assuming he can't hear me since he didn't react to that. Let's see. Never mind, autocorrect really does suck. Yes, autocorrect does indeed suck. Is that Salty and Kirk? Oh, behind me. Yes, that is me and William Shatner from about 10 years ago. I have another picture around here of, from the same con. Here's me over here. Me, the wife, and William Shatner. And that was a lot of fun. It's one of those things where, I'll tell you, I don't generally get starstruck, and I think part of that is because I grew up in California. I've met, like when I was a kid, I regularly hung out at the residence of Charles Schultz. And so, to me, someone who is a celebrity, that's just what what they may do for a living. It's not that big a deal. Um, and in fact, I think I told you guys, Mr. Know-It-All doesn't know this, but he probably can't hear me anyway, so he still won't know it. But when I learned how to play the flute, it was I was being instructed by Mr. Schultz's wife, and so I would regularly get to see his works in progress on his Peanuts cartoons and stuff, um, which is pretty cool. But at the same time, it.
Hey, I can hear you again.
Oh, hey!
Like magic.
It just suddenly popped in.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure. Again, EVMux is a wonderful system to use. It really is. The problem is that once in a while it wants to hang up on things.
Well,
And
and
if you're
its
using
audio settings don't comply to your computer's audio settings.
that's it, not at all. It wants to jump around. So forgive me. What did I miss?
Not much. I was just shooting the breeze. Telling an old story about celebrity. Because someone noticed the picture of me and William Shatner.
Yes.
And I was saying, I generally don't get starstruck, and this goes way back to when I was a kid, because now I don't think you know this. I play the flute. Well, I don't actively play the flute anymore because it hurts too much generally, but I know how to play the flute.
Copy.
I was classically trained.
Wow.
And the person who was my flute instructor was Mrs. Schultz. Mrs. Schultz was the wife of a Charles Schultz, who you may
Are you
know.
serious?
Yes, yes. So
That's awesome.
not only did I meet Charles Schultz, I saw him every week, and like I would
Oh my
see,
God, that's the best.
I saw like I would walk through his drawing room to get to where I would do my flute lessons, and I'd see his peanuts strips in progress and stuff like that. And he was a nice guy. He actually looked a little bit like Charlie Brown, a little more than I would have expected when you see him in person.
Was it the shirt with the thing?
No, no, it was his hairline. but
You're like, that's Charles Schultz. It's literally some older guy with an orange mustard colored shirt with a
yeah,
giant like zigzag. You're like, oh wow, that's him.
but yeah. So to me, meeting celebrities was no big deal because it was like, yeah, it's just what they do for a living, And I've met plenty of actors and stuff over the course of my life. And
Did
did he
Charles
have a
Schultz?
beagle? Not at the time that I was taking lessons, so that's good. But the
Yeah.
but like and like when I was working, so in the course of my work at Comcast, I did work for like Huey Lewis, and a couple
In the
other.
news?
No, the news weren't there, just Huey.
Okay.
And so they're just human beings like anybody else,
Story.
and then uh, and the one and only time I ever got starstruck by meeting someone is that day. It was
I can see that. I can totally
meeting
see
William
that.
Shatner, my literal childhood hero. The only way it could have been better is if Leonard Nimoy had been there. He was supposed to be there, but then he died shortly before that con, if I remember correctly, or
My,
shortly after.
my wife was absolutely starstruck when she met Ethan Peck.
Yeah, Ethan was a great guy too.
As we're walking by, because he's in
Yeah.
the dining room, she's like, we got to go by, and I said, but that's Ethan. She's like, no, let's just walk out. Let's go outside. I was like, okay, and we go outside. She's like, I wasn't ready. She's like, I would have just froze up right there. So she had to like mentally prepare herself to meet Ethan Peck and actually talk to him. And so when she finally did, it's so funny because as we're talking, I had to be the one to tell her. Or remind like because she was just like, "Hi, I love the show," and I'm like, "Your song is the favorite one." Her favorite one, and she's like, "Right, that." And so trying to remind her of stuff as we go. But anyway,
I was really surprised what a good singing voice
yeah,
Ethan had.
he's got that voice in real life, bro.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know that. Yeah, no digital finaglery with his voice.
Because he starts talking and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And you're like that bassiness you hear.
Yeah, yeah, he
Real.
is Spock.
That's in real life, and you're like, "Wow, bro, it's amazing." He's such a nice guy.
Right.
But all right, so real quick before we get way off topic now, thank you everyone for being patient with everything. Let's talk about the show, which is Agatha All Along, episode 3.
Yes.
What did you, sir? Did you have? So I assume you watched it.
Of all the episodes of Agatha All Along that have dropped, this was definitely the third.
So, okay,
No,
before we get too deep,
Yes.
I just want to say, one, this was not the most action-packed episode. This was not even the most exciting episode. But the story, I was actually engaged in the whole time. And I even looked over at one point to Miss Noto, I said, this isn't like over the top, like it's like this isn't like balls to the wall exciting like we would expect from a thing. This really does feel like, even though it was visually, I jokingly called it Magic Desperate Housewives, and but it felt like they were still telling us a story. We were still doing a thing, and I almost wonder if are we going to expect every show to be a bottle episode, like because they were basically another reviewer called it they were in a escape room. It was like
Yeah.
escape room Agatha.
Well, when we talked about it before,
Yes.
that's what I said. It felt like they walked into an escape room.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so let me say that, and by the way, just to answer Stan real quick, we'll get into open mic stuff later. But does he actually? No, he has curly hair.
Really curly hair
Yes.
too. Yeah.
So yeah.
But do you think it's a wig, or does hair actually turn?
you see, the thing is that there have been episodes where if you look at the back of his hair, it's kind of curly.
And in the
So I
front,
think they
sometimes
just,
his bangs will start at the very edges before
yeah.
it starts to get a little wavy. And I
So
noticed
I
that
think
too.
they just put a lot of product in his hair.
I do too.
So that's
awesome.
but anyway, so as far as this episode is concerned, I really, really liked the fact that it felt like an episode of a series, not a chapter of a movie.
Yes, there was a clear beginning, middle, and end. Something that we've lacked a lot of in a lot of these Disney Plus stuff. Regardless whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, or whatever, it always felt like they took a longer story and chopped it up.
Right.
Notoriously for MCU, since we want us to stay here, Secret Invasion felt like that for me.
Oh yes, Secret
felt
Invasion was, I think, the messiest of the Marvel shows.
Horribly messy, and so I was really happy that they didn't go that route with this. But so the premise of this episode is, in essence, that they get their first test on the thing, and I thought it was hilarious because literally the road gives them an engraved invitation on really nice paper, according to Mrs. Hart. And
oh, Mrs. Hart,
bro, rest in peace. Rip Mrs. Hart. Spoilers if you haven't seen the show, because you need to be watching the show. So,
yeah.
But here's the other thing. I don't necessarily know that I believe she's gone.
Yeah. And remember, her name is Sharon.
I know. So crazy. There was a wonderful poem. It's essentially the potions episode, to be honest. Even though it felt like it was very geared toward Mrs. Hart because of the style of it. Mm-hmm. But it was a riddle that had to do more with the potions person, and I thought that was interesting. So hopefully we start getting more of that stuff, which is that they start to little by little like lean into their strengths. But someone online pointed out there's shots in the original trailer promoting it where it's just Agatha and Teen. So now that leads to the speculation: are we going to lose one of them each episode until we get to the end,
or is it one of those? Like think of Charlie and Chocolate Factory, where they pick them off one by one, but then at the end they all come back.
I agree. Stanley asked, but I'm still not sure what the barefoot thing is about. Honestly, I think it was, and because Baby Know-It-All asked the same question, and I told her it was the road is considered hallowed ground. I don't mean holy ground, hallowed ground, which means it's very special. It's having to do
them. It would be If you're a witch, it's sacred.
Right. My issue with the show, just to go kind of to real quick give my one, because I have one strong criticism. The glossiness is gone for me. I need to start seeing something substantive, because right now the problem is it feels like a set. I know that I was corrected from my video where I said it was you suddenly go from the road, which is a soundstage, to with probably the volume for all the other stuff, and then you suddenly turn to I thought it was a CGI beach house, but apparently it was a miniature filming. But once you get into the house, it felt like you felt like you were in something that was being shot in a house, but outside everything feels very much like a set. Now, mind you, this is the least expensive show they've done that Marvel's done. The production budget I hear was close to $80 million total for this show, and so I'm like,
which is a lot more reasonable than $230 million.
Woof! Tell me about it. So,
especially when you consider, I think this show looks just as good. So there's that. Like the
gravesite area that looked very much like a set as well. I agree.
But that doesn't bother me, because to me, it's like they're going for the aesthetic of a dark Wizard of Oz.
Okay, so that was I haven't said this out loud yet. I'm glad you said that, because it's been itching in the back of my mind. I think you're right, and I'm similar to how, and you're going to hate this comparison, similar to how I've had to come to terms with what Discovery was in order to really move forward and say, okay, I want to watch these on their own value and see what I can appreciate the storytelling and other things going on. I think you're right. I've been saying to myself, maybe that's on purpose. Maybe they're going for like that, like you said, a dark Wizard of Oz, in which case, if I can look at it through those eyes, then I can put that criticism, I can pin it to a board and go, okay, I said it once, I'm not going to revisit. This is why so I like that.
And we also have to consider that they are not in the normal realm, so to speak. They are in some kind of witches only realm,
other place, pocket,
some pocket dimension or something. And so the rules of what indoor outdoor look like may be different there.
Right.
And so now if they come out of there and it still feels like because honestly when she came outside in the first episode, when she was outside the house interacting with her neighbors, it just looked like a neighborhood. It looked like the same neighborhood from WandaVision.
It did, which in and
You
of
know,
itself may
and
have felt a little bit like like you're shooting on Tyler Perry's. Tyler Perry's got like a 6-acre area that's just a neighborhood that is all building facades,
right.
and it's like,
But
and
it's so it's Westview felt like Westview. Is what I'm
right,
saying.
right.
So, but when they go through the hidden stairway in the cellar to get to the Witch's Road, all of a sudden everything looks very different. But in the Wizard of Oz, everything looked very different in Oz compared to on the Kansas ranch. So,
Agreed.
so I think that that's also intentional.
So Stanley says it must be disappointment for the Aubrey Plaza fans. They promote her and she's had like 2 minutes of screen time. That's kind of been the MO of Disney Plus, though.
Which one is Aubrey Plaza?
She's the one who's she's tagged as Rio. She's going to be the next. She's clearly, because we've seen the trailer, going to be the new Earth Green Witch that shows up.
Oh, okay, yeah. We're not done with her. She
Right.
is, yeah.
And in fact, people are. We got 2 cameos or 2 quick shots. One was a shout out and one was visual. When Liliana the witch from who's the seer, the diviner, she's having her hallucinations because they're all being affected by the wine poison. She sees Mistress Death, Lady Death, in the comic book style with the robe and the thing and even the little hood and the skeleton face, and then we get the callback from I keep calling her Kale, Jen, the potions woman, to Mephisto when she's talking to Teen. She's like, who knows when she's very heavy-handedly trying to red herring us into thinking Teen is potentially Agatha's son, and I don't know that's I don't believe that. I feel like they're pushing us in that direction a little too hard for me to believe that. So I'm much more convinced that it's that I believe firmly he's either Wanda's kid or he's got to be something else. But
I believe firmly he is not Wanda's kid.
Really?
Yes. Because Wanda's kid in the 616 universe was simply a temporary creation of Wanda.
But was she? Because it was Wanda's pulled it out of her head.
Yes, we saw the kids disintegrate at the end of WandaVision.
I know. But then we learned in Multiverse of Madness, she created them from her dreams, and the dreams are a peek into other dimensions.
Right.
So she created.
But that would mean he's from another dimension.
She created them based on another version that she saw in her mind. So they could be real out there somewhere. And again, the comics is all convoluted how that happens.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the comics. I'm just trying to focus on the MCU because the MCU borrows ideas from the comics, but not line by line.
And that's why I'm intimating. Like I'm trying to see, like in the comics, this happens. What would be the Feige-ist like adjacent way of taking that thought?
And yes, Stan, he's talking about the Thanos death. But I don't necessarily agree with that either, because that could have just as easily been one of the Salem 7.
So that's what Mrs. Know-It-All thought.
Yes,
you totally thought.
That's what I thought in the flashback. Is that was because when you see the Salem 7, they look very much like Mistress Death from the comics as well. At least the very quick glances of them that you get.
So Mrs. Know-It-All also asked the question real quick. She goes, don't you have to walk the road after you summon with a coven? Where is all of Agatha's coven from before? So she's asked, I think the question is, are the Salem 7 her previous coven?
That's a possibility, but it's a
really good possibility. But even she said they were all, those old crones were all dust when they asked her about her coven.
Well, but that was, because her original coven, of course, she wiped out in like the 18th century or whatever it was, which we saw in season 1. I'm sorry, I say season 1, but in WandaVision. Where she absorbed their powers to the point where she drained their life force.
We have not talked yet, Daniel, about Penguin. Well, we did last week. We talked about the first episode that dropped last week. Penguin won't air until tomorrow, so we have not. We will not.
We both agree it's a very well made DC Comics version of The Sopranos.
Totally, yeah. With some like blushes of the Goodfellas.
Yeah.
In terms of, so That's
Yeah,
about it.
I generally don't like gangster stuff, but I'm actually enjoying it so far, and I think in part because it's the Penguin, and I
Yeah.
still can't get past the fact that that's Colin Farrell in makeup.
Oh my
That's
God, me neither. Episode one, Thomas says Agatha goes into her son's room. It shows a plaque. Nicholas scratches a bronze bunny. Her bunny is called Scratchy. So that's the other thing we that's a great point, Thomas. What do you think of the idea, Salty, that maybe she didn't? Everyone thinks she had to sacrifice her kid, like killed him somehow or gave him
yeah,
up.
gave him to
What if she
Mephisto,
actually
basically.
just? What if he just was turned into a rabbit, like an animal?
So like Senior Scratches is her son.
It could be. It could totally be.
I I would find it more likely, to be honest, that either the kid is her son or that she gave up her son to uh, Mephisto.
I agree. I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Because
Which
and
we
it would,
got the name drop of this week.
huh?
Mephisto was name dropped.
Yes, that's true. It's so funny because everybody was freaking out thinking Mephisto is behind everything with WandaVision, and now we may find out that is the case.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. Can you imagine they
so
backdoored us into it?
yeah. Um,
That's awesome.
but yeah, I'm perfectly okay with Mephisto being the source of witches' powers because he's Mephisto,
Well,
and
and the
witches
popular
traditionally are satanic,
right, they're in popular mythology. Because
right.
obviously I think real life Wiccans and people who consider themselves witches might
Right,
take
but this is not trying to be real life Wiccans. Let's be clear.
no. They're
These are
very
not Wiccans. These are witches.
definitely full blown, possibly pointy hat witches. Got it.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. Cackling for laughs. The whole nine.
Cackling. That's funny. Mrs. Know-It-All does an amazing witch cackle.
And so, and notice, like, she even has a familiar with Senior Scratches, and which I do like. Spock very accurately defines a familiar as an animal sent by Satan to communicate with the witch.
In fact, Dinner Bells, yes. Yes. As you were, sir.
What is Lady Gaga a Wiccan?
And no, I'm joking. I just was like, sure, let's go with that.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Don't get me wrong. But no, I think that there's when we're dealing with something, and I mean, keep in mind that the modern mythology of witches has, and Wiccans have been around for, the new movement of Wiccans is a fairly recent phenomenon, but
Mrs.
you
Know-It-All is Taylor Swift, more like it. Go on.
know, but Wiccans aren't traditional witches, and witches are definitively evil, devil worshipping creatures that cast magic spells to do destructive things generally. Good witches are a pretty rare thing in storytelling, and in fact, I think the first time I ever heard of a good witch was probably Glenda from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Um, um,
That's real. Well, no, hold on. Oh, no, I guess you're right. Because that came before Bewitched, right?
yeah. Wizard of
Okay.
Oz was like the
Because Bewitched, I think, was before I ever saw.
I think the Wizard of Oz was 1930s.
Oh,
It is one of the earliest Technicolor films,
wow.
which is why, like, when the door opens and you see the yellow brick road and the
Yes.
land of Oz, that to the audience at the time, that was an amazing visual because most of them had never seen a color film. So imagine you're watching this typical black and white movie, then the door opens and all of a sudden everything's in color.
Agreed.
That would be just mind blowing to the audience. Um, and that's also why the colors in Oz were so ridiculously over the top vibrant.
Well, that plus they were trying to show off the technology
Right.
because that was an amazing bit of technology that they had never had before. And so all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my God, here, let's show it off." I mean, that was an incredible feat, and it blew people's minds.
You see,
People
this
were
is where I
just
show off there. I'm more of a know-it-all than Mr. Know-it-all. That would be the episode Cat's Paw, written by Robert Bloch from Star Trek: The Original Series.
There you go.
Where Spock defines what a familiar is.
They
But
do kill, they do kill one each off the episode. We have 3 left, 4 with the guy. I don't know if the guy's gonna go. I think the guy's gonna possibly make it toward the end. So I also have a weird. I think because I feel like they may double down to be like, look, we're taking it so seriously. We're killing off characters and blah blah blah. I have a feeling they're going to undo it all by the end. I feel like Agatha's going to learn her lesson, she can find her redemptive arc in this whole thing, realize she's better with a coven or whatever else, and then ultimately because remember, like you pointed out, Agatha in the comics eventually is Nathan Richards' nanny, and I don't see why they wouldn't go down that road, or at the very least get her there somehow.
right. And so yeah, so if she, that's why I still think, and I would be so happy if I'm right with this prediction though. But and I said it last time, but I would love for the last thing to happen in this series would be a post-credit scene where she goes knocking on the Richards family door, and Pedro Pascal opens up the door to hire her as the nanny for Franklin.
That would have to be like the like end credit scene from in Fantastic Four. Because I don't think they premiere or show the Fantastic Four because they're coming to our world because they have their own world they come from. At least from what I can tell.
Right, but that just sets. Remember, they do things already that are slightly out of chronological order in the MCU.
I don't know if they do it on purpose, but yes,
No,
they
no.
absolutely
Sometimes
have.
they do. Sometimes, and like if you look at, um, there are some movies that take place out of order with other movies, like
Sure.
like we got in Avengers: Infinity War. Then we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, but at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp was the dusting event from Infinity War.
Which they had, but they had to put that one at the afterwards because how in the world are they gonna? How
Well,
are
I'm
they
just
gonna,
I'm just saying.
they spoiled that whole thing.
So the timeline is a little convoluted there.
It's a little
So
long.
so they could make the end of this take place after the end of Fantastic Four because it was really urgent that this takes place at a certain spot in the timeline. Doesn't
Well, there's
seem
still so this takes place. We did the math. This takes place in 2006, 26. Sorry, 2026. The Agatha does the show. So
based on it being 3 years after WandaVision.
yes, and WandaVision itself took place 5 years after Endgame. So, I mean, it's interesting because
Right.
that's
So this could well be at the Fantastic Four could well be taking place while they're on the Witch's Road.
I agree, but I don't think they movie wise they would reveal that beforehand.
And no, Thomas, I have no intention in seeing Wicked. Maybe when it comes on streaming, but even then, it'll only be if I have nothing to do, and I'm just in so much pain that I need something to help me sleep. Because I am tired of, and even though this show and the Penguin, I know I'm being a little hypocritical by saying I like this show and I like Penguin, but I'm tired of shows that try to make the villain just a misunderstood hero. I don't like, and that's what Wicked does. And so with the Wicked Witch of the West,
It was almost the original. That's been a while. That deconstruction thing. It's been a while.
yeah, and I'm not into that. I would prefer my villains to be villains. Now, honestly, that's not what they're doing with Penguin. Penguin is clearly just evil, right? Penguin wants to be a criminal boss. He is not interested in being a nice guy. One of the first things he tries to do in his own series is kill teenagers, right? So Penguin is
That's
not,
hilarious.
you know,
Or at the very least, threaten them.
yeah. Well, he shoots at them.
I know he totally does. Stanley
Yeah.
says, "I assume Agatha starts very shortly after Wanda dies in Doctor Strange." I agree. That's kind of where I'm envisioning it. I don't know that we're standing on ceremony to be like it takes place exactly a year or 6 months or whatever.
The
I'm with
only
you.
thing we know is it takes place 3 years after the end of WandaVision because the neighbors say that she had been living in that town for 3 years and that she was weird. And the reason she was weird was because Wanda cast a spell on her.
Right. Well, and he says because it's Wanda's death that causes Agatha's illusion world to start falling apart, and I absolutely agree with that. I think it's exactly what that was.
Right. But
And
we
he
also,
good, and he also points out very correctly because a lot of people have been asking about this. The kid probably wouldn't have been able to break Agatha out if Wanda was still alive.
I disagree with that because
I think that's exactly true.
but you see, We also get the line, though, in Infinity War when Doctor Strange is confronted by Ebony Maw, and he says that you'll find breaking a dead man's spell to be very difficult. And so it sounds like breaking a dead person's spell is no easier than breaking a living person. In fact, it can be more difficult because the person
Okay,
can't reverse their own spell.
I think to be fair, I think you may have taken that out of context. I think what he's talking about is
It's the protection spell specifically.
he put a protection spell that says you can't take this. It's a I am if I die you can't like whatever. He's I think it's a dead man spell that he's referring to, not a dead man spell meaning the spell of a dead man.
But you see, I understand that, but we also see in the MCU they've established that only the witch that casts a spell can break that spell. And so it would stand to reason then, and I understand what you're saying. Like if Doctor Strange was literally creating a spell called Dead Man's Spell, to where if I die, the spell never breaks. I get that that's a possibility, but I also see it as if Wanda casts a spell and her death it would do anything, the spell would just be instantly broken if her death was a factor. If her since her death didn't end the spell, then I would say it should be nearly impossible for anyone else to break that spell. But this kid did it. How did this kid do it? Because he's got some kind of tie to Mephisto, and Mephisto is more powerful than any witch.
See. Well,
I don't know what he is, but he has a tie to Mephisto.
I'm all about theory crafting. I genuinely am, but I have a feeling for some reason I feel like I feel like that's a. I don't know that.
He's got the sigil on him.
We don't know whose sigil it is. It does say because Mrs. Know-It-All pointed out this week, it could very well be that the M is for Maximoff, that she put the sigil on him to protect him for whatever, however. Because remember, he had a mom. He had a Wanda mom who also died. So I don't know.
Except that he didn't, because he's not Wanda's kid.
I don't know. I disagree. Real quick, Mrs. Know-It-All wanted to comment. She said she's not sure if she's going to go see Wicked or not because she actually saw the play and it was brilliant. She can't understand why they'd put this on the screen in order to like abbreviate or shorten it or whatever else. And I my whole thing is if they were going to do since we're kind of real quick taking a quick path adjacent to Agatha with Wicked. I feel like the Wicked story would have been better served had they done like the Hamilton treatment, like done it as shown a produced version of the stage play, so you get to see all the effect of it. Because I loved that version of Hamilton. I felt very immersed. I felt very much like I got this to see it that way. So seeing Wicked like that might have almost been better.
And dirt cheap to produce as a film.
Super dirt cheap to produce. Literally, you do it live for a couple of times just so that you get the audience reaction.
And you get the different camera
Everything else is all close-ups.
Yeah.
And you can film them separate times, and it's really inexpensive to put together, and people would love it and eat it up. So, but yeah, we'll start there. Real quick, what are your overall thoughts about Wanda? Do you think that not Wanda, forgive me, about Agatha? Do you think it's is the show going to get better, or where do you think it's going?
I'm still interested in where it's going, which is the important thing with a show like this, is that they haven't lost momentum to me. It's you mentioned at the outset that this was not an action-packed episode, but this is not an action series.
Agreed. This is not guys in tights fighting. This is a very cerebral.
Right.
I'm with you.
Right. And now that doesn't mean we won't get some kind of action set piece at the end where the witches confront
whoever
the Salem 7 or whatever.
Sure.
But the important thing is the journey, the character building.
The point is the friends we made along the way.
Or killed.
That's right. The friends we got rid of, removed along the way. ABJ says, strange meant I know how to undo the spell. You don't. And if you kill me, good luck. I said that because I want to say the next one also. He says, before that he said, it depends on the nature of a spell cast. I imagine any spell can be undone if you know how and have sufficient power. Now that's all very logical, and I agree more or less in theory with that. I don't necessarily know the MCU is working on being logical or making things make that kind of sense, but I do agree like that's how I would interpret it to work.
Right. And we'll see if they ever give us a reveal on that.
So what about all this stuff that's saying Acolyte was tanked for whatever reason, and they're complaining because Agatha is not currently in the top, I think the top 10 streaming shows of the last whatever weeks or whatever. But there's how come that show could do so well? I think part of the problem that you're going to find is Agatha's
Turn on investment.
exactly. Agatha cost them 80 million to make, and for the money that they've spent, it's still retaining an audience.
Right.
Whereas if you look at the numbers for something like The Acolyte, it started strong out of curiosity, but right after episode 2, it dropped not sharply, it nosedived.
Right.
And suddenly you have all this cost and nobody watching it. So they're like, that's the math they're trying to figure out. People are coming to the service to see Agatha. They were not coming to the service to see Acolyte. And so it's kind of like, ugh, how
Well,
does it work?
and I think that's where like people are forgetting. That's why studios like Blumhouse are thriving right now, because Blumhouse can take a $10 million budget, put out a horror movie, like what's the one they just did with McAvoy, the
Oh yes, the one you saw, the
yeah.
Silent or
Speak No Evil.
Speak No Evil. That's
And so they can put out a movie like that, and if it makes 40-50 million dollars at the box office, sure, if it was an MCU movie, that'd be an abysmal failure. But for them, they just made $25 million.
agreed. Agreed.
And guess what? That's going to fund 2 more movies. And or 2 or 3 or 4 depending on the budget.
Agreed.
Some of these movies, I think the original Don't Breathe had a budget in the single digits of millions of dollars.
I could see that.
And so, yeah.
Stanley mentions also, at least Agatha doesn't seem to be trying to make any serious changes to the universe. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's one of those
Small stakes are a good thing sometimes.
100% because it lets you live here. The only thing that matters is Agatha's. You made us care about her. You make us care about her story. We're not sitting here going, by the end of this, we're going to get Wanda and it'll lead to the next whatever. No, we're here and we're happy here.
Right.
It's very different versus trying to reshape lore and bring whatever change to whatever. You know what I
This
mean?
is Wanda getting her groove back. That's what it is. How did Wanda get her groove? How did Agatha get her groove back?
Stands on point here. He goes, Acolyte was easier to hate since they were trying to reimagine the Jedi. I'll go with that. It felt like you were touching something sacred in there,
But
and
see,
we were like,
that's where and where I'm going to fight with you a little bit on that is that I agree that is a reason to dislike the Acolyte, but this is not the show that's doing that.
agreed.
Andor did it before that. The Last Jedi did it before that. This is an ongoing concerted effort to make the Jedi morally ambiguous.
No, I think they're trying to. Here's my possibly. I think the problem is everyone moves and is proceeding or moving on a false assumption, which is where it's always about the Jedi. It's always about the Jedi, bro. We've never gotten the Jedi. What we got in the prequels was Qui-Gon and Dude. We got 2 of them. That's the closest thing we got. And then maybe in Clone Wars, seeing a bit. But otherwise, we've never lived in an actual place having to do with the Jedi that weren't directly related to something having to do with the Skywalker saga. Like, we've never seen I actually loved a lot of what the picture they were painting. Saul was an amazing Jedi character until they decided to character assassinate him right in front of our faces. So it's like you sit here and you go, what, like we've never gotten, but people are like, well, we need to make the Jedi interesting. They're boring. It's the same idiots who are out there saying, Superman's such a hard character to do. No, he's not. You have no clue how to write him then. Because there's been decades and decades of comic books having to do with the stories that are amazing. So same thing with this. I think you go into these things and you say, well, I want to change the lore of the thing, but we haven't even seen the established lore. Now, if you're going to argue that the EU told us a bunch of Jedi stories, which they absolutely did, then fine. But the EU
don't adapt those stories.
Right. The EU's canon isn't canon anymore, so now you have the responsibility of showing us those stories. So don't start deconstructing crap until you've set up what your version of that history looked like. And they've never done that.
But and the thing is, like, I know the ABJ was mentioning that Andor had nothing to do with the Jedi. what I'm talking about is a larger in scope than just the Jedi.
He's talking about a systemic taking apart of the
It's a
good guy, bad guy, and the heart. Well, let's talk about the heart of Star Wars.
Yeah, they're
Good
trying to
versus evil.
deconstruct the very core of Star Wars
Right.
to make good bad, bad good. It's not
Or
about
even not even that insidious to make it ambiguous.
right.
Where
Well, and that's the thing.
it
Like,
could be either
remember
way.
what was it that? And again, it really, I think the genesis of this is the Last Jedi, and part of the reason that I despise that film with all of my heart is the fact that it purposely tries. It takes away the idea of good and evil and replaces it with balance.
Well, and not to
And
mention, it also take like you're right. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, gaping butthole in space
yes, the
butthole.
gaping butthole in space was, and notice, and like, and this was,
You have to go watch his.
yeah, in that review. Remember, and I don't know, did you watch the entire review yet?
I literally have a few more, but just 'cause I've been busy, not because
Okay.
I'm
At,
going back.
at one point, and I don't know if you've seen this chapter of the review. At one point, Luke is educating Ray, but really Ray has to educate Luke because but about he says reach out and feel the Force, and she
I
starts
did see that episode.
yeah, and she's listing all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
That she sees life, death, renewal, all this stuff, right? And but notice she keeps saying light things and dark things. She never, ever, ever says good or evil,
Right.
and that's kind of the point. Is that the dark side isn't evil? It's just not the light side, and the light side isn't good. It's just not the dark side.
Yeah, I got you.
And so the and and when we look at Andor, and I understand that they're trying to be more realistic and gritty. And I know I've said this a million times. I don't watch franchises about space wizards for gritty realism. And when I watch Andor, they literally have two terrorists sit down and plot to commit a terrorist act against the established government in order to get that government to inflict martial law on the people so that the people will in turn rebel against that government.
So
That is the plot.
ABJ brings up he says, Last Jedi I concur entirely with Salty, which is fair. I just don't think the entire Rebel Alliance should be conceived of as a paragon of virtue. And I have to agree with him.
The reason
I get where you're coming from. By the way,
Yeah.
I do understand where you're coming from.
Right.
And I even see the seeds of the things you're talking about. But the problem is, for me, the difference between Andor, Last Jedi, and even Acolyte are very night and day. While I do understand where you're coming from, I do. I need you to know that. I feel like they're not the same exact thing. Now, because to me, there's nothing wrong with the idea, because if you look at any war, modern war today, horrible things are done on all sides. World War II, we were clearly, quote unquote, the good guys. There was Axis and there was a lot of allies and the whole bit, but there were things that were done that were rough, that were hardcore, that probably
Yeah, but again, the problem is you're arguing realism. I don't want realism. I'm not interested in realism. If I want realism, I'll watch Saving Private Ryan.
Well,
Right.
I think it's because at the time they were trying to, what Star Wars wanted to do, before we get into the deconstructionism stuff, which I believe is genuine and has clearly been shown. I think that the idea beforehand was, how do we set up and establish, how do we go beyond just this in terms of letting people know the universe and the world? Now, I think you have decades of books that did a great job doing exactly that. But they don't want to touch those. So
Well, and
how
here's
do we differently?
the funny thing is that the prequels actually, I think, sparked some of this initially. While the prequels didn't make the Jedi out to be evil or the Sith to be good per se, if you look at the prequels, and one thing that always bothered me about them is that the Jedi have no compunction about just straight up murdering people. And I never understood that. I really, and the thing is, though, ABJ, heroism means doing the right thing, despite the fact that it may be more difficult, more costly, etc. That's not what these characters, Doing the right thing isn't committing a terror attack in order to launch an insurrection against a established and lawful government. You may not like the imperial government, but the imperial government was not a coup. Palpatine was elected and given the special powers by the Senate. So he didn't take over. Now, again, I know that
Well,
but I'm
until you get to Empire, where they talk about the dissolution of the Senate completely.
that was actually in the first movie.
Oh, yeah, it's where
Yeah,
the
but the funny thing though is the original trilogy clearly showed a good evil
Hey, Death
paradigm.
Rabies, by the way, welcome. I'm sorry you're late. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. So the first film, Star Wars, it's just called Star Wars.
Yes,
It is
yes.
not called A New Hope. That is the dumbest name ever.
Got it. Star Wars.
Yes. So Star Wars, and then Empire and Jedi, were very clear. Empire, dark side, evil. Rebels, light side, good. Right? And yes, they were all paragons of good and evil, but that's the storytelling technique. We're not talking about gritty, realistic war movie. We're talking about fairy tales in space.
Right.
And by the way, if you read a lot of the classic novels, like Splinter of a Mind's Eye and other early novels, they continued that. The Empire, dark side, evil. The Alliance, light side, good. And this continued on for a long time. But then in the prequels, something happened that really started to bother me, and that's when they would say things like, well, let me know when you kill this guy. Great, I'm going to go kill this guy. Hey, don't forget to go kill that guy. And they were acting like it's nothing. Murder is nothing to the Jedi at that point. And I did not like that.
I don't remember those lines you're specifically referring to, but I'm sure I don't doubt you. I'm sure they existed. I'm
Right.
not.
One example would be like when Obi-Wan was talking to Yoda in Revenge of the Sith, and he says, send me to kill Palpatine. Because I can't kill Anakin.
Did he actually say those
Yes,
words?
he said the word kill.
I thought he said to deal with, but maybe I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
I'm going to take your word for it at this point. I'm not going to argue that because I don't remember.
Was Anakin a full-fledged Jedi? Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was. He was just not a Jedi Master, but he was a Jedi.
Yeah, he was never given the rank of Master, but he was given the rank of Jedi.
Yeah.
He was not a Padawan by the third film. But the now where I think the
I think we know. Hold on. Thomas asked, why would Luke want to fight the Empire? The Hutts controlled Tatooine. Yeah, but the Empire killed his aunt and uncle, murdered them.
Yeah, and there's more to it in the deleted scenes. I'm sure you've seen like the scenes with Big and stuff where the Empire was spreading and everybody, the Empire was considered this giant monolithic
Juggernaut of it was rolling through. Well, again, they're based loosely or interpretively loosely on of Nazi Germany. It's based on how they just rolled through. Everyone was letting them get away with
Right. It wasn't until the prequels that we found out the Empire was actually the legitimate government, which is kind of funny. But the and the Imperial Senate was not dissolved until later. And notice, if you look at, and that's why I think Andor is the crux of where I think the problem comes from, is at the beginning of Andor, we have Imperial control. This is post Order 66.
Sure, yeah.
And keep in mind that Order 66 was Palpatine's emergency measure to stop the Jedi from taking over, which the Jedi were trying to take over. So even though, yes, I know Palpatine is an evil character, but his Order 66, you can argue, was a legitimate.
Well, they weren't trying to take over, though. In fact,
they even said they were.
Mace Windu said exactly what they were going to do. They were going to take him. They were going to take him down first, arrest him, and when they were going to wait. They were going to make everyone have lawful, put everything back to normal, have everything law. So they were going to hand everything back. They had to wrest control first.
Yeah, but to wrest control is to take over.
Yeah, but not no. See, but you're trying to don't play semantics. I'm not the one. You
I'm
know,
not playing semantics.
that's a semantic game. It wasn't exactly like that. They wanted to do it for the sake of being able to say, okay, now that Palpatine's arrested, hey y'all, everybody sit and we have elections and get everything back on track again.
Why do you think Yoda's like, whoa, whoa, whoa? We need to be pretty cautious about this.
I agree.
You know, but I'm not saying I don't think the big
You
problem.
don't remember Mace having a warrant? Sure, he did. It was the big bright purple one he was swinging around.
Hey, here's my warrant, mother effer.
Exactly. This is a great question. Hang on. And I'm going to try to answer this legit, and then I'm going to let Salty answer this in his salty way. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but I know there are a ton of books. Why don't they use the material from the new movies and TV shows? Brother, that's a great question. I think the honest truth is the old material before the new books, because the new books are considered technically canon according to Disney. The old stuff, as they called EU Extended Universe, became legends. They say, yes, that stuff exists. Some of it's still in print, but they don't acknowledge it. That stuff is factual to what we're watching now. And so, right, wrong, good, bad, indifferent. It's what happens when you pay $4 billion for ownership of something. But I think the new stuff is canon, and it fits between all the stuff we're getting to see. Like there's actual story that explains a series of I think 3 books that tell Leia's story from all the way from Return of the Jedi all the way up to when we see her in The Force Awakens again. So it's what it is, man. I'm with you though. What do you think, Salty? Why do you think they don't use the books?
Okay, so the cynical old man in me says because Disney can't make as much money off of those because they don't have the rights to the old books. But honestly, I think that in some ways they are adapting it because we're getting the Thrawn story is starting to be woven into it, and Thrawn was from the EU books. Granted, it's a slightly different Thrawn than we had in the books. Unfortunately, much of the fan reaction to Ahsoka was very negative, and I liked Ahsoka.
I like Ahsoka also.
I like Thrawn a lot, and
I thought Thrawn was brilliant.
I'm going to be really disappointed if the Thrawn saga doesn't happen. Because
real quick, Thomas asked what crime were they being arrested for, having a different belief in the Jedi? No, specifically, and they mentioned this at the very end of things when the war was over. The minute the war was over, based on a set of events that happened, he was going to have to give over his power. He said flat out he wasn't going to, and he told Anakin. He told Anakin that when he first revealed who he was, that he was quote unquote a Sith, trained by the dark side or trained in the dark arts, and then he goes to Mace, and that's when Mace and them. And yes, they are the protectors of the Republic. They are the ones who uphold. They are the ones who uphold law, good, order, whatever in the Republic. So they do have carte blanche authority to a point. I don't know if we take anything from Andor or from Acolyte as being canon, that I think that was not as fully formed back then, and then became that way as time evolved. So when they go to arrest him, it's because he's already revealed to Anakin, and Anakin is considered a credible witness in that respect. Now, mind you, they probably could have walked, and they walked in and they said, "We've come to arrest you and take you, whatever." He could have been like, "All right, no problem. I'm going to give up my authority, whatever else." He didn't. He chose to attack them and fight them back. At that point, it's self-defense. So yes, they did commit a crime, and no, it wasn't believing differently. It was that he was going to maintain power no matter what, and not give up the special powers he was supposed to give up after events A, B, and C happen.
Is that your answer?
I mean, that's my answer. Go for it.
Mr. Know-It-All, you ignorant slut.
Good, give it to me. Give it to me. Let's go.
No, this is the problem. From a legal perspective, the Jedi had nothing because Palpatine was given special powers by the Senate.
Right.
There was nothing about that said he simply said, "I will give these powers back." Just like Trump said, "I will build a wall." You don't show up and arrest Trump because he didn't build the wall.
I don't know. Ask Kamala. She thinks differently, but go on.
Well, the Kamala.
I'm kidding. I'm not making this political. I'm sorry. Go on.
You don't arrest somebody for not being able to fulfill a political promise, which is all that was given. He never, as far as we know, there was no requirement that he had to give back the political power. Furthermore, when the Jedi showed up and said, "You're under arrest," they ignited first. They threatened Palpatine with deadly force for no reason other than the fact that he was not willing to simply give up his seat to a bunch of religious zealots that just came over from the temple. And so it was Palpatine, not the Jedi, that was acting in self-defense in that scene.
So I'm
Because
wondering,
if somebody, hold on, if somebody walks into the room with you, brandishes a gun, points it at your face, and then you quickly pull out a gun you had hiding on your side, you pull it out and shoot him, that is self-defense.
so I want to make sure I understand this right. In a world, in your good versus evil world that you like, you're defending the legality
I don't
of
want to.
the guardians
I'm talking about
of
from what we
truth,
see.
peace, and essentially the law. Because we're not shown that there's any kind of actual until the Clone War, the clones are created and conscripted into quote unquote an army for the Republic. There is no like the Jedi they are the ones who are sent to keep peace, law, and order throughout the galaxy for the Senate. The Jedi work for the Senate. They don't work for the Chancellor. So they were in essence. So I'm just making sure I understand this right. Because your argument to me is very interpretive, whereas I'm just going what's on the page. What's on the page
I'm
is
going with what's on the.
they are the guardians of truth, peace, and the law, established. They're the ones
Wait.
whose job it is to help defend and protect the Senate.
Where does it say law?
Republic.
You said truth, peace, and law. Where does it say law?
They're the ones who uphold the law. They're keepers of the peace. What is that? What is that called? What do you do?
Keepers of the peace is different than.
What do you call when you
law.
keep the peace? What is keeping the peace? You sit here and you say, "Shh, it's going to be okay."
Who
Or you
sent
sit here
the?
and
Oh,
say,
wait.
"It's gonna be
Okay, then let me ask you, who sent the Jedi?
The Jedi sent the Jedi. That's their
Okay,
job.
but you just said they were. Hold on. Now, UN peacekeepers, they're genuine peacekeepers.
I do not compare the UN peacekeepers to Jedi. I am sorry. That's a very different, just because they share something in common in terms of that name
Okay,
and title. Those guys are
CIA
simply-
operatives. Whatever you want to
I
say,
don't know this
they're
guy ever.
sent by the governing authority or the authority over them. Whether it be Congress or the president, they are sent. Right? Like you wouldn't have SEAL Team 6 just show up at the White House sent by SEAL Team 6 to arrest the president. That would be a military coup. The Jedi sending the Jedi to arrest the Chancellor without the authorization of the Senate means that the Jedi were acting illegally.
I think that is an interpretation. I don't necessarily know that.
How is it not correct? Because
Because
every other time we see the Jedi sent, they're sent by either the Senate or by the Chancellor.
Right.
But in this case, the Jedi acted of their own accord, with no authorization from anybody, to arrest the sitting galactic emperor.
He was the chancellor at the time.
No, he was the emperor. I think wasn't
No,
the
he was
empire
the
established
emperor.
at that point. Well, no, you're right. The empire was established just after. So he was still the sitting. He was the sitting chancellor. He was this. But that would be like so. It would really be like if a group of military specialists that work for the government, on their own accord, decide to arrest the sitting president of the United States.
I guess. Listen, fine. Here's the other thing. I'm fine. I'm happy. I will.
Joe Biden, thank you so much for the $1 donation. For some reason, I'm hearing it twice.
SEAL team is doing what to me?
Read it.
I
What's it
better
say?
finish my
SEAL
ice cream.
SEAL team is doing what to me? I better finish my ice cream, says Joe Biden.
That's hilarious. I'm gonna back out of this entire thing, not because I actually. The thing is, I'm not okay with arguing a point. You just seem to want to argue the point because you can't, in my opinion, have the thought process of good versus evil and how Andor is wrong and everything else, and then still be defending a position that I don't think holds up on that merit. Because
here's
the Jedi, here's really what it boils down to. The Jedi are the good guys. They determined he was a Sith. He was evil and bad. Good was trying to overtake evil before it became what it ended up becoming.
But
they had the opportunity to fix it, coup or not, whatever you want to label it. I'm fine with whatever label you want to put on it. I don't care. Then clearly, good guys were trying to stop the bad guys. and you seem to have a problem with it, but we're still talking about Andor and all the stuff that you have a problem with there. You got to pick a lane, bro.
No,
And
no,
I
no.
know you wanna-
So
I know you wanna do
you're
these
missing
things.
you're missing the connective tissue here.
I
So let me.
really am, because
All
I'm
right.
sorry. In one hand,
So-
I don't like how they're trying to say the Jedi are bad guys, but the Jedi were bad guys for trying to take out the Emperor, bro.
Right.
Pick a lane.
What I'm saying
Pick a
is
lane.
no. I'm not defending the idea that the Jedi are bad guys. I'm showing how the Jedi are being portrayed as bad guys. Because what happens is, yes, what I'm saying as far as the throne room scene, if you just have the first 6 films, then you would be 100% right. But we don't just have the first 6 films anymore. Now, not only do we have the sequel trilogy, but we also have intervening shows like Andor, which support the idea that the Jedi were wrong. Because if you look at Andor, at the beginning of Andor, people were free, people were prosperous, people were doing well for the most part.
Were
At the-
they? Because when he sneaks
How were they
home,
not?
Because when he sneaks home, everybody seems to be very much of the mindset, yo, don't break the apple cart. They're gonna take more. They take what they want already. Let's not make them take more stuff.
Do you want?
Like,
Do you?
everyone's
Okay.
very, very much not. They don't want to inflame things and make it worse.
Of course, nobody wants to inflame things, but I'm saying so. Andor, so since Andor grew up in the ghetto, you're assuming that everybody was in the ghetto, because when we see things like Coruscant, everybody's doing great, and there's freedom of
Of
travel.
course, everything's doing great in Coruscant. You have to keep the
Hold on.
impression
We also-
of prosperity.
We also see things
even,
are.
even in Andor, Mon Mothma is talking about how empty all of this pomp and circumstance and nonsense is, while she's like, I'm worried about the money and finances to helping this uprising, this insurgents, because all of this is empty and foolish. And you hear the people, the upper echelon people, including her husband, who are all, I don't know what happened. I guess we're lucky they helped protect blah blah blah. And it's like, that doesn't sound very
We also.
good. If
We
that's
also.
the case,
oh,
I wish the Jedi would have been successful in their coup, in their illegal coup. I will stand with them through consistently. I'm not
hold
going
on.
to be flim-flammy and wishy-washy like you are, sir.
I'm not being
I'm
flip
going
flammy
to-
wishy-washy. I just
I'm
don't like the way
firm.
that this has gone.
Up with the Jedi coup.
No, hold
Up
on,
with the
hold
Jedi
on, hold on.
coup. I wish they
On
would have
the-
illegally been successful.
On the murder planet, I don't remember what it's called, but the planet
The
where
murder planet.
yeah, the planet where Andor murders those
Totally.
people in the first
I know what
in
you're
the first
talking
episode.
about.
You know, so which, by the way, so Andor is the story of an actual murderer being tracked by a police officer, and they make it out that the police officer is the bad guy. Andor commits straight up murder in the first episode.
Yeah, he does. No, I
And
get that. He
and the
does.
cop that's trying to bring him to justice, we're supposed to think is an evil space Nazi.
As much as he's more like Mama's weird kind of.
Well, he's an incompetent one, but I'm just saying he wants to be, he's a wannabe evil space Nazi.
Mrs. Know-It-All says you and I need to watch it together.
Yeah. So but if we look at Andor, it justifies what I was saying about the Revenge of the Sith. Now, I don't, like I said, if Revenge of the Sith was the end of the Star Wars saga, as it was for 20 years, if that's as far as we went with it, then sure, I have no problem with with people like Thomas that would say Palpatine did nothing wrong. I'd be like, come on, you're full of crap. The Sith are evil, blah blah blah. But now that we've had shows like Andor that actually corroborate people like Thomas suggesting that it was a group of terrorists, straight up terrorists, that caused the Empire to become more oppressive. And the reason it did that was because they needed to give up freedom for the sake of security, which is a theme that we've heard in politics forever in the real world.
Sure.
All right, and so which is more important to be, and what did Franklin say? People who are willing to give up their freedom for security deserve neither.
I agree
But
with
but if we look at it, the only place we saw where life was harsh in the beginning of Andor was Andor's home planet. Now, was his home planet a member planet of the Empire? I don't remember.
I believe so. I thought they were. I believe they were.
Okay. I don't remember if they were on the Outer Rim or not. I can't remember that. But I'd have to go back and rewatch Andor, which I haven't done since it was originally on. But assuming that that is a member planet, okay, so it's a poor planet, but that doesn't mean, I mean, every other planet we saw was doing nicely. And we could see, like, for example, ambitious mama's boy police officer
Right.
had no problem moving to Coruscant and getting another job, even though he was
Right.
disgraced in what he was doing. So you have freedom of movement, you have freedom of opportunity as far as employment. There doesn't seem to be these huge oppressive things where people have no rights until the clampdown. Why is there a clampdown? Because terrorists start attacking,
I would argue
basically
that they were freedom fighters and insurgents trying to prevent
freedom from what?
freedom from the empire. See, because the one thing that has been documented throughout many stories and other areas is that the empire was consistently they were suddenly taking things.
It's a little thing called
resources, taking. They weren't. You think they were paying for Carillion spaceships? No, they were saying those things are ours now. We need to. These resources are ours now. Your factory works.
So what you're saying is that they were enacting eminent domain.
Absolutely, that's a great way to put it. I'll go with that.
Right. So does that mean the United States is the empire?
Bro, I think we know the answer to that question. Come on. So there's been a lot of, if you want to say, yes, absolutely. There's things happening everywhere. And it all began with 9/11. At the minute like you said, enacted, we want to give up our freedoms for security. And now we're all being observed.
Right, but here's the problem.
Okay,
you just nailed the problem.
100%.
No. You don't even realize it. It started with 9/11.
Sure.
Prior to 9/11, people wouldn't have considered the United States the evil empire. Prior to the terrorist attack in Andor, the empire wasn't evil. At least not to the average person. I get that Palpatine is a Sith and all that, but I'm just saying to your average Joe living in the empire prior to the Andor attacks, there was nothing wrong with life in the empire.
So I like ABJ's take. He says the dark side rose because the Jedi side strayed. Them arresting the Emperor is symptomatic.
Yeah. I do think them arresting, like even when you look at Mace Windu actually was going to summarily execute Palpatine.
I agree. That honestly, and by the way, I'm not okay with it, but I would have been okay with the outcome of it. I would have felt like he would have had to deal with it. He would have had to answer for it. If anything else, he might have been touted as something in the Republic, whatever form of the Republic it took. If they weren't all strung up for being what you're, because I do believe there's a side that would have totally taken your perspective, the perspective that you espouse in this argument. But I feel like he would have had to have been kicked out of the Jedi, had to have, because that was such an anti-Jedi. And Anakin is correct when he says, but he should stand trial. Like, it's not their job is not to be executioners, though in the line of duty, people do get killed. Just like in real life, when the police have a weapon, this and that, things happen.
And yet, but Obi-Wan was sent to kill Grievous. Obi-Wan was sent to kill Anakin. The Jedi, well, for being people that are not supposed to kill all the time, sure do go on a lot of kill missions.
Well, at some point or another, you realize that the only way to deal with evil is to cut it off. Hey, what's going on, Aravic Sonder?
Hey, Aravic.
And so I mean, I don't know. Yes, but that's part of the. See, now what's funny is you've basically fallen into the moral ambiguity that they want us to argue about.
Well, and that's my problem with much of the new Star Wars. That's kind of so. Yes, I'm making these arguments, but consider I'm making these arguments more or less as devil's advocate, because what I'm seeing is this is what they're doing with Star Wars. This is what's wrong with Star Wars. What I'm arguing as far as the Jedi arresting Palpatine being the wrong thing to do should not be the case. But the reason it's the case is because they created a larger context around all this in which dark doesn't mean evil and light doesn't mean good. And that's a big problem. Because in the original trilogy, it was clear who were the good guys and the bad guys.
Well, let's talk. But it's funny. I'm glad with that. I'm going to real quick try to segue us at least to a little bit of something else. Talking about bad guys versus good guys. The Thunderbolts trailer came out this week, and it lays down a really interesting set of events that I know that we wanted to briefly touch on. I'm of them. I don't believe this is going to. Everyone's out there wanting to make comparisons to the Suicide Squad. I don't believe this is bad guys and all that stuff. I believe these are misunderstood people who I think Val's taking advantage of them, and I think at the end of it all, Val's going to try to pin something on them. I don't, and I think the asterisk is going to be because they're eventually going to have to become another team. They're going to become another thing, whether it's Dark Avengers or whatever else you want to call them. I think that's the asterisk. I think has more to do with that, but I don't believe it's everyone. I don't believe this is what people think it is.
Okay, so I'll agree with you to a point on this. So, first of all, unlike Suicide Squad, if you think these are all just a bunch of criminals that are being forced to do it, have you not seen all the movies and stuff that all these characters have already appeared in?
Yeah,
Because unlike the Suicide Squad, these are all established MCU characters.
agreed.
Bucky is a straight up hero. Right?
I think absolutely. I think Bucky's a hero. I think
And while Red Guardian is kind of a goofball, he was trying to be the Soviet Captain America. He was trying to be a hero for his people.
he really was.
You know?
He wanted to be a source of pride the way Captain America is, and
Right.
and he never ever got to be that.
Right. Now, Ghost, the one with the face mask there at the bottom, I think is Ghost, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yeah.
So
No. That's Taskmaster. Ghost is in the upper corner. She's got no mask on in the upper.
Oh,
Right
you're
above-
right. You're right. Okay, yeah, let's go sit in the top, right above Red Guardian. Ghost is a character who, if you watch Ant-Man and the Wasp, her motivation is to cure her own. You know, she was in so much pain and such agony that she didn't care about morality. She just needed to get fixed,
Agreed.
and she was promised by various people that that they would help her, and she was also abused by Shield for who knows how long.
Stanley, we don't talk about that. I'm sorry. I refuse to acknowledge the Secret Invasion exists.
Yeah, Secret
Things so
Invasion.
bad.
I have a theory on that, which I'll get to in just a second. But
So bad.
however, with Ghost, I think that's the one where you could say, okay, she was a villain, but the reason she was a villain was her circumstances, not because it's in her heart, so to speak. And so I could see her reforming. Now, U.S. Agent.
Yeah.
Again, good, solid military record, wants to be heroic, wants to do the right thing. However, kind of like Wolverine, has a little bit of an anger management problem. That's
Just a little bit.
yeah. I mean, so now, granted, in the heat of combat, killing somebody with your shield like that really isn't. I mean, remember, his best friend was just brutally murdered by one of these people, and he was literally fighting them, and he just happened to do it. Messy things happen in combat, and
True.
and so that incident, I think, was unfair as far as to him. His reputation is forever tarnished. But he's a bad boy, but he's a heroic bad boy. He's like Wolverine to me. And then we get to Taskmaster, who is a straight up slave.
Right. Who now is quote unquote free, more or less.
Right, because of the potion and everything that the Black Widows were all under.
The potion.
Yeah. And that leaves
Science. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, and that leaves Black Widow 2.0.
Which I do like the angle they're taking with her, which is that she's sort of in this weird ambiguous place of, well, what do I do? All I know how to do would be this. So she thought that would be maybe that. Let's start there.
Yeah, she's where Black Widow 1.0 was prior to the Avengers.
Yes, I said the exact same thing to Mrs. Know-It-All.
And so, so these are not criminals who are being forced to do something good. I think these are people who are almost heroes. They're right on the fringe of like any one of these people with just a little bit of tweaking could join the Avengers.
Agreed. No, I agree.
Fact, Bucky already fought with the Bucky already fought.
Still get that.
Yeah. And I think that I do think that my biggest problem with the trailer was the tagline that Val gave that we used to believe that there were good guys and bad guys, but what we really know is there are bad guys and worse guys. And I now I hope, and this is my biggest fear for the future of the MCU. I hope that's just Val's opinion, and that's not the opinion of Feige and all that.
So
You know,
Thomas said, but Shield is good guys. Good guys don't do bad guys or bad things. Actually, Shield did do bad things, and that's why Shield no longer exists because Shield
Right.
does not exist right now.
but yeah, Shield was actually Hydra. Which I'm fine with the way they did Shield, because there were good people at Shield that thought that Shield was what it
Should have
what it pretended to be.
right.
But what we didn't know was that Hydra was actually, a parasite within Shield, as
true.
what's his name said.
Yeah, no,
So I'm okay with that. But some character, like for example, if they have, Captain America 2.0 suddenly break bad, I would have a lot of problems with that. Or if
Sure.
like, so if in in Brave New World, if Captain America all of a sudden decides to be a straight up,
Sam starts smoking fools
then I'm gonna have a problem. Outside of combat, like because
to show you how we do this downtown.
yeah. The Avengers, a lot of people die, but they generally don't. They don't die maliciously. Like they'll die because people are shooting guns back and forth, and somebody gets hit.
Ariel coming in with a hot take. Hydra was ruled by the best villain, Robert Redford, and I absolutely agree with you.
Robert Redford was great. I really liked him.
Magnificent. I think he was absolutely magnificent.
Yeah.
So good call, Ariel. Good call.
So these guys definitely not Suicide Squad. I think they're all very much redeemable. Now, the thing I think is interesting is that we know that Thunderbolts is coming out after Brave New World, and Red Hulk appears in Brave New World.
What is hold on? Thomas says seems like Sword isn't all good. Is there an MCU organization that's actually good? What are you talking about? Sword was taken down by what do you call it? Bad Skrull people. I don't know what that's got to do with Sword. Sword is still there. It still exists.
No, but he's saying like the director of Sword was corrupt in WandaVision.
He wasn't corrupt. He was a dick. Which I mean, I get it. He was a dick trying to hold on.
I think he was one of those people. Ends justifies the means.
Right.
So I don't think Sword is an evil organization at this point. I just don't, but I'm okay with them making human mistakes. I'm not okay with them being evil. Because I don't want every
Fair.
organization to just be evil.
That's fair.
But as far as the Thunderbolts are concerned, so we know Captain America comes out first,
Yes.
which I am really looking forward to.
Same.
We know Red Hulk is in Captain America.
Yeah.
Red Hulk is Thunderbolt. This show is called The Thunderbolts.
So Kevin Feige has already come out and said there is no connection other than the names are cool. Like Thunderbolt Ross was his nickname, not his handle or whatever.
Right.
So it's not there is in the comics there is an actual correlation, but this is apparently not like that.
But you see, but then again, they have the asterisk, and Kevin Feige has been known to lie his butt off.
No,
Yeah,
Kevin lies.
Which, by the way, I love the fact that they're so good at it at Marvel. Whereas like the other studio, like you remember when J.J. Abrams was like, "Oh no, he's not Khan. What are you talking about? Benedict is playing this new character for Star Trek."
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, no, we wouldn't do Khan, no. And and then when he goes, "I am Khan," it's like
The first time I heard that, like him being like, no, I first heard anybody say he might be Khan, I was like, no, they wouldn't do that. And then they did it in the movie. I was like, seriously?
yeah. And, the funny thing is, and I don't know why they didn't do this. When he goes, "I am Khan," Chris Pine should have looked at him and said, "Who?"
That's hilarious.
Because
He says it like he says it for us like that.
yeah, it's straight. It's a straight fourth wall break.
Totally
Because
was.
yeah, but that's why I'm saying Kirk should have been like, "Well, who's Khan? What are you talking about?"
For sure. Real quick on our previous discussion, ABJ, which by the way we're now in wide open territory. If you guys want to talk about stuff, which we are going to bring up, Acolyte in just a moment for a good reason, not just to beat it up more.
Although beating it up is fun.
Andor starts selfish and is transformed by joining up against evil. He means Andor proper, the person, not just the show.
Right.
The cop is good, but he's working for evil. I like that distinction, and I do agree with that.
Okay, but here's the thing. I don't. We already know where Andor's arc goes, and Andor
Literally, we know where it ends.
yeah, because if you haven't seen Rogue One, spoiler alert, Andor is a dead man. But the thing is that the first thing we see Andor do is murder two people, and then what is the first thing we see him do in Rogue One? Murder somebody. So, and not only that, his
At least they're
coworker.
consistent.
Yeah, yeah. So he goes from an evil murderer to a good murderer, I guess.
I think moral murder is a thing.
Yeah, moral murderer. Yeah. It's like, oh, we got to get away from those soldiers. What are we gonna do? Well, I can get over that wall. Too bad you can't. All right.
That's awesome.
But wait. I
No,
mean,
bro.
and that's where I get that they were trying to go for we're edgy, but at the same time,
We're edgy.
yeah. But a hero would have made that stand against the stormtroopers and then drug his friend out. That's the difference. Andor was not a hero. He was just a hired gun, and I didn't care about him at all because of that opening scene in Rogue One. And so far in the series, I haven't had anything happen that really convinced me he's anything other than a multiple murderer.
He's someone who feels like he has to fight against the Empire for whatever reason, valid reasons or not.
Right.
He feels like he must fight the Empire through any means necessary. And I'm not saying the last thing I'm doing is taking a moral stance on his actions, other than saying, I get it. I get that you don't think that that you need to make that distinction. I get that to you it's like we have to hurt them as much as possible because that's ultimately the nature of what war is, and he feels like he is at war regardless, whether it's insurgency, rebels, whatever you want to call them. So at the end of the day, like I don't know. I think that's one of the reasons why I like this is giving me so much more context to Andor's speech in Rogue One. When he actually says, he's like, I finally want this to be what he wants to be. The rebels that we eventually learn and discover in A New Hope and all those movies going forward. He wants to be that. He wants to be the moral compass. He wants to be right for once. Can you let all these murderers and all of us who have been doing bad crap do something good for once? And I get it. I get the sentiment. And that for me is why I feel like it doesn't fit exactly the narrative of the Last Jedi or Acolyte, though I can, again, please understand, I absolutely see where you're coming from in that respect.
And I would tell you, look, if you want to see a similar arc, Han Solo. Han Solo in the first movie straight up murders a guy. However, by the end of the first movie, he's changed. By the second movie, he would never murder anybody. And so Han Solo changes because we see him go from I'm a chaotic neutral kind of character for D&D terms to he slowly becomes more or less chaotic good.
Okay, you did this to me this week. We were talking about stuff, and I think that's it's a good way to play with it. I get it. Yeah. I get that. I'll go with that.
Yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about before we went? Somebody mentioned Andor again and triggered us.
Oh, so so news came out this week that the Acolyte is confirming it was Forbes. It was a Forbes interview that essentially
Lucasfilm confirmed
that is a company out of the UK who does some jiggery pokery with the numbers and everything else has sort of revealed that the production budget up until the time of release or whatever, not including marketing, had ballooned up to $230 million. Now, I personally thought the production budget had always been $180 million. Obviously, Salty said when I brought it to his attention, he's like, I always knew that. And maybe I missed that note from stuff. But now that it's being confirmed, the next question you have is not the same ones, but when you begin to include marketing and everything else, because it costs money to go on those talk shows. People don't just put you on a talk show because they like you. They put you on a talk show because it's advertising. That's why you get that 4 or 5 minutes at the top of a thing, and then they go into their stories. So at the end of the day, like, this show probably had closer to almost a $400 million budget with marketing.
Right.
And if you're not putting eyes on it, That's why the show tanked. I'm not even
Well,
get into the content or substance of the show. Forget that.
right.
That's insanity.
And here's the cynic in me talking for a
Go
second.
for it.
Where the hell did $230 million go? Like,
It's
how?
not on the screen, although you can. I even said because Mrs. Know-it-all asked the same.
I'm not saying the visual effects are bad.
No. But Mrs. Know-it-all asked the same question, and I have having been in the business because the reason we're asking is we were once asked by a producer. We had presented a project which had a budget of about $3 million, and there was a producer who was like, "Can we get that closer to 10?" And the reason is, believe it or not, investors want to believe they're investing in a real thing, and that comes with a higher price tag is what the expectation is. So when suddenly you come in with a lower price tag, they're like, "Oh, so you're giving me less of a product?" Okay. So the idea, so we were like, okay, well, what did we cut, and what can we put back in? Let's add a location. Let's add some stuff. Let's add production value. Let's add more crew because we've been sort of cutting back on crew with all we needed. So instead of having two PAs, let's give everyone a PA, which is normal. So now we had a dozen PAs, and you're paying. So you have salaries. You have the cost to take all 200 people in the crew to Brazil to shoot those 3 scenes that are pretty empty, and then which are literally people walking on a hill. And then bringing them all back, and you have like you have to house those people. If it takes 20 days to shoot something, that is imagine what it costs you to stay at a hotel for 20 days, one person, just you. Now multiply that by the 200 people who are on the crew, and travel expenses, and feeding them, and.
I get that. I too. I understand a lot of the logistics behind filmmaking. However, you also have to acknowledge that a 40 or 50 million dollar movie can accomplish take away the crazy visual effects stuff
Sure,
because
sure.
we're not talking about that. But a 40 or 50 million dollar movie could accomplish what we saw on screen in The Acolyte minus visual effects. And I don't understand. I mean, I could understand if that budget inflated to, say it was originally 100 million and then it got up to 120, 130 because of reshoots and stuff. I could see that.
Right.
But 230 million, that is more money than they spend on most Marvel movies. That is more money than they spent on. I believe that's more than they spent on The Force Awakens,
Yeah.
and that's insanity.
My, my thing is, you can't.
You
You
can't just
cannot tell
pay
me
people
someone
that
looked
much.
at that. Well, and so I watched the YouTube video because that's where I get all my information these days. And
Yes.
one of the things that they outlined was that show was greenlit in an era when we were all going into lockdown, and it was we need content as much as possible, and they were willing to throw as much because the idea was Disney and Netflix were right neck and neck at that time in terms of streaming service. Disney had come on strong. They were really hitting things hard. And so next thing you know, they're like, well, we're going to do all this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And they were of the mindset, we're going to pour money into this thing because the eventual goal is we will get people to come to the
Right,
service.
they wanted to bury Netflix. That was their goal.
Right. So they figured, well, we'll outspend them because we're the mouse. We can do that. Not realizing, no, you can't, because people were expecting a certain level of quality that you were no longer giving them. We were already expecting Netflix's garbage quality for most of their stuff.
Right.
We did not expect Disney to suddenly turn down in quality to accommodate that. So then Iger comes back. The Acolyte hasn't come out yet, and he's like, we got to retool. We got to make this right. And so then they go back for reshoots, which, by the way, reshoots is why we got the soundstage stuff because they had filmed, according to what I'm hearing, they had filmed most of that in Brazil, like actually. And I'm like, oh, really? And they had to come. So they were like, we'll give you reshoots, but no, you're not going to Brazil again. Y'all got to deal with what you got. That's why you get that stark contrast between Brazil footage and then that soundstage with whatever Bob Baca.
Hmm.
I don't know what his name is. Lobaka? Whatever. Anyway.
Not Chewbacca.
Yeah, no, right.
That's his name, not Chewbacca.
No, it's real. It's real. And yeah, absolutely, ABJ. He says, was the budget with COVID inflated costs? Yes, but that was the initial production. Initial production budget would have gone up because of COVID costs, because you now have to hire a whole team, you have to train, you have to all of a sudden new supplies that are not normally in a budget. But that would have probably only accounted for like maybe 1.7, if not at most $3 million more, maybe. And a lot, now the other thing I will say, because I heard this argument made this week, and it's valid.
Mm-hmm.
Most sci-fi shows on this scale, and I'm not talking the budget we're talking about, but on the scale of Acolyte's supposed to be, you pay a lot up front because they built like 3 cities worth of actual practical sets. They built a whole bunch of stuff, the towns and all the other stuff. But my rebut, so they expect to reuse those in future seasons, which would then, so they would amortize that cost over. For the P&L, they would say, okay, great. In season 2, we're going to absorb some more. We're going to move some of that loss over to this season to stretch it through because we're still using those sets. So it's like it's like amortizing a piece of technology or your automobile. You're allowed to put so much depreciation on. So same exact thing. We're getting into real deep weeds, heavy finance. Forgive me, but at the end of the day, when you deal with a show on this level that's doing what it's doing, you hope you can reuse it. And when they couldn't, what's the point? Now, don't get me wrong. I firmly believe they're going to end up, someone's getting this. Some show down the way, they've told Dave Filoni, oh, you can have practical sets. There they are. You got to figure out how to use them. And by the way, that's totally doable.
It's easy, actually.
If anybody has seen that, there's that show, The Chosen. They have one nice, very well thought out city set that they've constructed, and they've constructed it in a way so that from any corner, and that show has, within the confines of the show, has played 1, 2, 3, at least 4 different actual physical places. Mm-hmm. And that's how you do it. You take those sets, you shoot them from different angles, you relight them differently, you dress them up, and now that's your practical sets.
Star Trek was doing that for decades.
Absolutely.
With their various sets that they would just redress a little bit to make it look like it's something else.
Well, and that's
all the way back to the original series.
I told Mrs. Know-It-All, the reason why we lived in the 23rd or whatever century from Next Generation through Deep Space Nine, TNG, and whatnot, Voyager, is because they were like, we've already got most of this stuff. It costs us very little to redress a TNG hallway to be Voyager's hallway.
Right.
Versus reconstruction from the ground up is a much more expensive proposition. And that's why you lived in that space for so long, is because they were like, we're just going to keep going. We can make them cheap.
Right.
And that was there's nothing wrong with that mentality if you're smart.
Well, and I think part of the problem that, and this is not just a Star Wars problem, this is a modern filmmaking problem, is that I think Hollywood has ballooned its budgets to a point where directors don't have to think how to rein things in enough, because especially when it comes to sci-fi, fantasy stuff. So instead of thinking, how do we make the Avengers a little more manageable? We're like, hey, can you throw another $50 million on this?
Yeah, can we just change our outfits, all of them, because I don't like this one thing.
Yeah. Think about as much as the movie is maligned, including by myself. If you look at Star Trek Generations, they literally could not afford uniforms. And so people were wearing all sorts of mishmash different uniforms throughout that movie.
They really were.
Because and the funny thing is, the reason they couldn't afford the uniforms, they spent too much on the uniforms for the Enterprise, the seagoing Enterprise scene, on those custom uniforms they made for that whole thing where they promoted Worf.
Right.
And so because of that, they couldn't get everybody in the fancy new uniforms, so they had a mishmash of Deep Space Nine and TNG uniforms.
By the way, yes, Stan, they did. He asked. Stan asked a couple questions. First was House of Cards Netflix's first original show? No, but I think it was their first big high with like a big star. Like at the time, Kevin Spacey was a big star, and it was the first one that they were taking seriously, and thus everyone else in the world took it seriously. And then he goes on to say, didn't Star Trek do like the westerns or 40s era stuff because they had access to used sets?
Yep,
absolutely.
Why do you think so many episodes of Star Trek were filmed at Valdez Rocks, or as it says, yeah, because you can shoot there right now for free.
walk out there, kick
Yeah,
the
you
camera
do
up.
not need a permit.
Nope.
And so that's why every time they needed an alien planet, hey, I know where to go.
Yeah.
Plus, the rock formations are so weird that you move the camera 10 feet and it looks like a totally different place.
Yep, it's great. It's not. That makes total. And again, that's the difference between and that's the if. And I hate to make these comparisons because people think I'm doing Star Wars versus Star Trek. Star Wars would do good to start really borrowing some of that Star Trek thinking historically that's existed. Even now, they redress stuff. Discovery toward the last end was constantly being redressed to be Strange New World stuff.
Right.
The hallways, whether it was the hallways or even the bridge, like I guarantee you, now that Strange New Worlds is happening, they were like, okay, everything from Discovery, what can we recycle? What can be brought over and not we don't have to reconstruct from the ground up certain things.
And look at the yeah, you can tell if you look carefully, you can see the Discovery Bridge and the Enterprise Bridge are the same set. You know,
added more furniture and brought in those two the two things in front, or brought them closer together for that front thing.
right. Well, they made look more like the classic TOS layout.
Right.
But if you look at the room, like look at the arches that they had on the bridge in Strange New Worlds, and then go back and look at Discovery, and you'll see arches in the same place.
Absolutely.
So
well, and the hallways too. They've reused a lot of those things. My point.
By the way, Netflix's first original series was called Lilyhammer.
Yeah, right.
I looked it up. I've never seen it, but
I've heard of it though. I have heard of it in other.
Came out in 2012.
Yeah, they've done a lot of original stuff since, I think House of Cards was the first time it was super high profile.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And House of Cards is the first TV series to have been produced by a studio for Netflix.
Oh, interesting.
So
interesting. Well, because for the most part, the way, like when we had our deal with Netflix, we were told, you go film your thing, and you find all the stuff you got to do, and when you come to us with a completed whatever, we'll make notes, send you back for changes, and then once it's done, they were literally going to just hand us a lump sum check for whatever the season amount was, and that was it. And we would, and of course, by then you have to pay off your debts and everything else. But then now the show is on their service.
But okay, so here's the real question for you. Ready? Without looking it up.
Okay.
What is Netflix's most popular original series of all time?
That's a great question. Stranger Things?
You are very close. Stranger Things is number 2.
Whoa, what's number 1? Comments. You guys have any comments? Listeners, you guys have any thoughts? Without looking it up, you liars. They're all going to be like, it's this one. It's like, no, bro, just go.
10 people are going to put in the right answer all at once.
All of a sudden, you're like, you bums. No.
By the way, that's specifically that number 2 spot belongs to Stranger Things season 4.
Oh, okay.
They actually break, because number 10 on the list is Stranger Things season 3.
Arabic says the game. Stanley says orange.
No, Orange is the New Black does not even come up in the top 17. So number 1 is Squid Games.
Oh, which is funny because it's not even really theirs. It was a Korean show that
they purchased.
Yeah, they purchased.
That has 1,650.45 million hours watched.
Wow. It's a good show, man.
Yeah.
It's a good show.
By the way, number 3 is also one of my favorite Netflix shows, Wednesday.
Oh, I love Wednesday. Same. The only thing I don't like about it is the guy who plays what's his face? Who plays her father. I cannot stand that actor for anything.
The Witcher is way down at number 13.
Oh my gosh, Mrs. Know-It-All. By the way, I'm looking at it right now. She texted me, and then she had to send another text. She said at 1:45, she said, I'm guessing Squid Game. And then I was right because I'm Mrs. Know-It-All! Exclamation points. She said. I love that so much. Go on, I'm sorry.
All right, so there's your trivia question for the day.
Yeah.
But I'm glad Squid Game was number 1 because I love that show.
I'm wondering why it took so long to come up with a second season.
When are they going to come
seriously,
out with season 2?
It's come. They finally dropped the trailer, a teaser. It's supposed to be coming out, I think, this year, or maybe toward the end of this year.
Does it have my favorite new Korean actor in it? Or
Yeah, of course.
okay.
No, he's in it. He's in it.
I'm just checking. I don't know
Yeah.
because
So
the way
I
they ended
wonder.
it, they could have just had a new
They
cast.
seem to the implication. I could be way wrong and misinterpreting it. Things like that happen. Trust me. I feel like they may be doing a Hunger Games where it's like, okay, now the best of the people who from before can be in it, because dude's invited back in the trailer. He's invited back by a guy with the dark mask, and
Okay.
I'm like, what? Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, because the way the season 1 ended, he was going to go after them.
Yes. Remember, he dyed his hair all crazy
Yeah.
anime color and was heading
Yeah.
out. Yeah, it's crazy. Man, I tell you what, that's we've covered a lot of ground today, I think. How about
Yeah.
you?
No, I don't think so.
Not at all. No, it's good.
No. Because you still think that the Empire is evil, even though you've seen these shows that show that the Empire did nothing wrong.
Nope. Sorry. I think the Empire is totally evil because that's how it's always been in Star